Peter, James, and John have been following Jesus for quite a while now. These are the same guys who have left their nets for Jesus. He said, "Follow me," and they listened. They've watched as Jesus has healed the sick and thrown out demons. They've heard him already tangle with the Pharisees and spin a parable. They've experienced the miracles of stilled storms and Jesus walking on the water. They've heeded his words so that thousands could be fed. They've seen a lot, they've heard a lot, and they've experienced more than their fair shares of unexplainable things. So much so that Peter's got a pretty good handle on who Jesus is. He's already proclaimed him to be the Messiah, the one that they've already been waiting for. Apparently, they have been listening. So when Jesus says, "Let's head up this mountain," of course they listen. Plus, mountains were where people went to be closer to God. So I'm guessing that they're thinking they're going to have a life-altering experience up here on this mountain with Jesus. Well, things certainly do happen, but when it comes down to it, my question is, does anything really change? They don't get to stay up there and camp out. They just head back down the mountain. Moses and Elijah don't even stick around for very long. And Jesus himself gets all razzle-dazzle before them. And then he goes back to being exactly who he always has been. He was the Son of God before they went up the mountain. And he is the Son of God when they come back down the mountain. They sort of get ripped off. Nothing obvious in their lives changes, besides the fact that now they are overwhelmed, scared, and terrified. Great. What we all want of the mountaintop experience, right? I, for one, would skip this type of mountaintop experience. I mean, most people, like you've heard this, right? Mountaintop experience, we talk about this. Most people think of it as a good experience. Something that leaves you feeling higher than a kite. And something that you cannot wait to share because it's just so good. Sort of a sanctuary. Well, I'm telling you what, this scary, overwhelming, uncomfortable experience on the mountain is not what I have in mind when I think sanctuary. Now, I do want to say that I think that some people do have what we typically call mountaintop experiences. And when people share these with me, I am downright in awe, and I am grateful that they share those experiences with me. But it is certainly not everyone's experience. Not everyone has these flashes of divinity, which leave them feeling certain of God or peaceful. Which brings me back to why even go up the mountain in the first place. There is nothing peaceful and certain about it. And plus, the point can't be, if you listen to Jesus, then you're going to have some glamorous mountaintop encounter. That can't be the point. The glitz and glimmer doesn't even stay. Not even for Jesus. So what are they doing up there? I'd say they needed a firehouse experience. Did you just say, what? Let me explain. So as many of you know, I've been volunteering at the Burtonsville Fire Department down the street. It has been something that has energized me in ways that I can hardly explain. I remember when I first came here to this place, that I knew in the core of my being that this was exactly where God needed me to be. And something that whenever I tried to put words to it, the words always fail me. But it was, and it is, as Peter says, good for me to be here. So although it is different, I feel similarly about being at the fire department. I hear something of God there. Something that, yes, my words fail to give voice to. And it is also good for me to be there. And hopefully it is good for them too. This may sound very strange to you all, but the fire department has become a bit of a sanctuary for me. But a very, very different sanctuary than this one. The fire department is an uncomfortable sanctuary, which is an odd way to think of sanctuaries as uncomfortable places. See, the truth of the matter is, when I'm there, I am totally out of my element. I have no idea what I'm doing. I mostly keep my mouth shut and listen. Like most of you, I spend my days doing things I know how to do. And normally, I know what to expect out of my days, at least within reason. So when I'm on their turf, it forces me into a heightened sense of awareness, which I don't typically carry with me. My brain seems to function on high alert the whole time I'm there. Being there and listening to them do life has expanded my own experience of God's action and God's hope. And also my awareness of pain and struggle has been deepened. So I've heard stories of God, even though they might not say these are stories of God. I've heard these stories of God that I never would have heard had I not also been in that sanctuary. Unless you count the flashing fire truck lights, there isn't a dazzling light show like up on the mountain. However, I do feel pretty dazed and confused most of the time. And that's what Peter, James, and John are given. A firehouse experience. An uncomfortable sanctuary. And of course, it doesn't feel right. So they want to do what comes natural to all of us. They want to put up tents. As far as they know, God belongs in a tent. That's where the prophets of old went to go to talk to God. A tent was an appropriate place for God to be. So they longed to build a safe place. Enough with this unsettling sanctuary up here on the mountaintop. I imagine them sort of thinking, if we could just get God back inside this tent, then everything will be just fine. Everything will go back to normal. But I think God wanted to shake things up a bit. It is true, the Transfiguration confirms Jesus' divinity. It is so much about that. But there's more to it. See, if I was writing this story, my follow-up line to Jesus' glowing would not have been, listen to him. He's practically radioactive, right? I would have said something like, this is my son, whom I love. Just look at him. Isn't he marvelous? He's radiant. But that's what they see. That's what we see when we look at the Transfiguration. But what does it say? What should we hear of the Transfiguration of Jesus? See, God knows that they're about to go back down the mountain, and it's going to get downright uncomfortable. Jesus is going to die. He's not going to be there right in front of them speaking to them anymore. And God needs them to keep on listening in the hard and unsettling and uncomfortable places too. In a very big way, God says to them, "There are things of me to hear in the very places which make you uncomfortable, unsettle you, and even terrify you. The places that you want to avoid, listen for me there too." I saw this so acutely when the youth and Kirk and I were in Guatemala. We were most definitely in uncomfortable sanctuaries. Half the time we could not understand the words which were said, and most of us couldn't say much. All we could do was absorb it into our being. And I think if you ask any one of us who were there, we would say that we heard Jesus speak in ways that we never would have heard if we had stayed in our safe tents. God for us expanded there and transformed us. Listening deeply does that. Now, I don't typically get into all this when I talk with you, but today it seems to make sense. This piece seems to matter in the bigger picture in terms of our relationship with God and, quite honestly, in terms of our relationship with others. The words that we translate, "listen to him," can also be translated, "listen for him." As I said, they've been listening to him. Often we can listen to Jesus when we know we're supposed to, right? When we're in church, we can listen to him. When we read the Bible, we can listen to him. We expect him in certain places. But listening for him is different. It's almost like an unexpected adventure. Sometimes we say that God can be heard in the sheer silence, like in those quiet by the lake with the sunrise peeking over the tree moments. And often we do hear God in that silence, and we are able to listen to him. Peter, James, and John can also attest that sometimes the sheer silence needed is that of our own. For us to be quiet and let other noise and other people talk. Even for us to let God talk. If we are the ones being sheerly silent, it may not matter if there's 1,000 cars rushing by, or people running around in the grocery store, or even loud, blaring alert tones at the firehouse. Those may just be surprising sanctuaries. God's place of being expands when we come to realize that God has taken up sanctuary in every place. That's the gift of Jesus coming down off the mountain. Coming down to take residence with us here on earth. Not in one specific place, but in all places. Jesus is pitching sanctuaries. Now, the truth is, we do need safe tents. We do need places to go and rest in the palm of God's hand. Places to listen to God. But we also need uncomfortable mountains. Places in which we are taken to. Places where we're on high alert. Places to listen for God. Which means that sometimes we have to allow ourselves to be uncomfortable. Now, I don't know what that place looks like for you, but I do know there is one for you. An uncomfortable sanctuary that God is journeying you to. And your uncomfortable sanctuary could be a person. Someone who speaks of God, who lives in a way that draws you to question or ponder. Your uncomfortable sanctuary could be a place. Somewhere you don't know what to do or say, but you know in your heart that there's something enticing and honest there. Your uncomfortable sanctuary could even be God. I know that mine often is. Someone we don't fully understand, who can unsettle us to our core and catch us off guard, and yet draws us deeper and deeper into residence. My question for myself and for you all today is, what will you hear in all the sanctuaries you enter? As it always has been, it will be a curious journey. Amen.